This is going to be a multi-part series, and we are going to discuss drugs, the prohibition of which has created enormous strife in the United States, whether or not it has been worth it, and whether or not it will be worth it going forward. I hope that you guys like this, and if you have comments, please, by all means, leave them in the comment section with your thoughts on the matter. First, we're going to start off with a brief history of drug prohibition with a smattering of sarcasm. Although various counties in America tried to enact some form of alcohol prohibition during the 1800s, drugs were first prohibited on a federal level in 1909 when the Smoking Opium Exclusion Act banned the possession, importation, and use of opium for smoking. In 1919, the grand old 18th Amendment was ratified, banning alcohol and ushering in the Prohibition era, which lasted until December 1933, when it was repealed by the 21st Amendment. Although the ultimate outcome of Prohibition was expanded government reach, the loss of many lives, and the introduction of gangsters and organized crime into American society, while doing nothing to actually stem consumption, Prohibition has also left a positive legacy for our society by leaving us exciting movie topics that otherwise would have never been developed. I'm talking Goodfellas, Casino, The Untouchables. So, in the end, I would say it was well worth it. To quote a leading journalist of the time, Henry Louis Mankum, in the year 1925, Prohibition has not only failed in its promises, but actually created additional serious and disturbing social problems throughout society. There is not less drunkenness in the Republic, but more. There is not less crime, but more. The cost of governments is not smaller, but vastly greater. Respect for the law has not increased, but rather diminished. After some fairly minor, especially by today's standard, laws against marijuana and cannabis in the 1930s, we had to wait a long time, all the way up until the 1970s, before we seriously ratcheted up our game against the drugs. This is when President Richard Milhouse Nixon signed the Controlled Substances Act into law, which outlined 5 schedules used to classify drugs based on their medical application and potential for abuse. Brilliantly, somehow, marijuana ended up scheduled as a Schedule I drug, the most dangerous, and accordingly posing a very high risk for addiction. Snack food companies were the most outspoken critics of the new legislation. LSD, heroin, MDMA/ecstasy, and other drugs were included on Schedule I, while cough syrup and codeine were listed as lowest risk, or rather Schedule 5, just to give you examples of where the drugs fell. In June 1971, Nixon officially declared the war on drugs, stating that drug abuse was public enemy number 1. This was, of course, in response to the hippie 60s when drug use proliferated. I find it very interesting that Tricky Dick would choose interdiction against these controlled substances, against the people that would never ever vote for him, on the premise that at least it was possible that they might be too stoned, if it was still legal, to get to the polling booth. Nixon increased federal funding for drug-controlled agencies and proposed strict measures, such as mandatory prison sentencing for drug crimes. In 1973, Tricky Dick created the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, a special police force committed to targeting illegal drug use and smuggling in the United States. At the start, the DEA was given 1,470 special agents and a budget of less than $75 million. Today, that agency has vastly expanded and has nearly 5,000 agents and a budget of over $3 billion. Triple the agents, 40 times the cost, far outpacing inflation. obviously considering that drugs are cheaper and far more widely used today than when the DEA began. This was once again money well spent by the American government and a shining example of why I will support higher taxes every single day and why I wish to give the government more of my hard-earned money to spend. In the 1970s, the war on drugs took a slight hiatus. Between 1973 and 1977, 11 states decriminalized marijuana possession. Jimmy Carter became president in 1977 after running on a political campaign to decriminalize marijuana. During his first year in office, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to decriminalize up to 1 ounce of marijuana, which was good news for peanut farmers and peanut butter makers everywhere. But in the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan reinforced the war on drug policies and expanded many of Nixon's. In 1984, his wife Nancy Reagan launched the Just Say No campaign, which was intended to highlight the dangers of drug use. President Reagan's refocus and the passing of severe penalties for drug-related crimes in Congress and state legislatures led to a massive increase in incarcerations for nonviolent drug crimes. Of course, Miami grew from a nothing beach town to a world-class city with all the drug money that was flowing through there. Plus, we got Miami Vice and their cool 1980s fashion sense out of it. So once again, let's not say the money was all completely wasted. Let's not ignore the upside. Today, slowly, the United States has begun to change its tune against reefer madness. In 2012, Colorado and Washington State passed laws to legalize the consumption, possession, and sale of marijuana, followed by Alaska, Minnesota, and Oregon. Then recreational marijuana was legalized in California, Massachusetts, Nevada, Maine, and finally Michigan. Today, the debate rages on as to the best course of action, and as I'll discuss in the next video, which might be in the upper left-hand corner of the screen as you finish watching this video, the decision is clear. Once again, if you're in favor of such changes, thank Frito-Lay for leading the charge and also for sponsoring this video. Like it, subscribe, peace out, and peace and blessings to everyone.